Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natenator. Rusty tried to comfort Dolores. Nunez, hand on his gun, opened the door. The smell hit him immediately. Musty, like a basement after a rainstorm, mixed with something sweeter. The potpourri his mother had kept in a bowl. He breathed through his mouth. He flipped the light switch. A teenaged boy's room. In the far corner, a mattress with bedding kicked aside. On the mattress, a young man, no older than 18, was propped up against the wall. His head hung down, jaundiced blue eyes still open. Skinny, anorexic, purple blood pooling under waxen skin. Stringy red hair. Blotched, infected track marks, oozing pus. Joints stiff and contracted. Swollen tongue lolling. Nunez buckled. He might have cried out. Trembling like a dog, he knelt by the boy. Given the darkness of the sunken cheeks and the violet hue of the flaccid limbs, he hypothesized the kid had been dead for hours, if not a day. Overdose. Slipping on a pair of latex gloves, holding his breath, he reached for the corpse's face. The glassy doll's eyes were too much to bear. If he closed them, his head would stop spinning, and his hands would stop shaking, and he could function like an officer of the law, as opposed to a squeamish little... A hand clasped his arm. An icy, vice-strong claw grasped his arm. It took him a twisting, maddening second to realize what was happening. Michael's, cold, dead, decomposing Michael's, cyanotic fingers were wrapped around his wrist. Nunez fell backwards. Michael sat up straight, folded, turned his torso. His stiff, angular joints jerked mechanically, grotesquely. His tarnished plastic eyes stared lifelessly ahead. Then the jaw moved, jostling the swollen, languid tongue. And with no respect for mechanics or anatomy, he spoke. Officer Nunez, a monotonous, alien mockery of a human voice. This will all burn. You will burn with it. Nunez grunted, kicked, tugged, broke free of the creature's grip. He twisted onto his hands and knees, stumbled to the door, turned the knob, and fell into the living room, slamming the door behind him. Dolores was curled on the couch, sobbing quietly. Rusty stood in the doorway, waving to the paramedics, who were making their way down the hallway with their gurney. The boy... he's not... Nunez stammered. Rusty turned to him, then snapped her head back toward the hallway. What the fuck? A paramedic, pushed past her into the apartment. On his heels was a teenaged boy with longish red hair and blue eyes, dressed in khakis and a NWA sweatshirt, looking quite confused. It was Michael. Michael, very much alive. Dolores screamed. In one movement, she threw herself onto her son, collapsing with him to the dirty shag carpet, clutching him in a suffocating embrace. Rusty gave Nunez a look. The paramedic rolled his eyes. Dying boy found walking upstairs to his mother's apartment, he said sarcastically. Please tell me he's got an identical twin. It was a miracle Nunez held on to his shit. Looking at Michael, healthy, breathing Michael, cradled in his mother's arms. He had never been so scared of a human being in his entire life. There's a corpse, he managed to force out. Eager to establish some context to the next zombie movie jump scare he'd just experienced, Nunez grasped the doorknob with his right hand to pull himself up. Searing pain tore down his arm. He fell to his knees, groaning. The paramedic pushed past him, opened the door, looked in, and snorted. There's nothing here. Nunez managed to rise to his feet. He and Rusty peered into Michael's room. There was nothing. The mattress, save a bunched up comforter and sheets, was unoccupied. No blood, no excrements, just an empty teenager's bedroom. He did a lap of the room just to make sure. He shook out the comforter, dug through a hamper of dirty clothes, threw open the closet door. Nothing. No remnants of the atrophied, decomposing corpse that had threatened Nunez with fire. He sniffed the air. The musty, potpourri smell still hung in the air, but it was fainter now, dissipated, despite the tightly closed window. Dolores, giddily happy, concluded she must have imagined seeing her son's dead body. She didn't do any drugs, no sir, clean for 12 years, but had been under a lot of psychological stress, and lay awake nights haunted by visions of her only remaining child repeating her youthful mistakes. That, with the heat and the smog, was enough to make anyone hallucinate. I saw the same thing she did, Nunez remembered saying. Michael sprawled dead on his mattress. At that, Dolores had frowned. What are you talking about? Sprawled? I found him hanging in his closet. Nunez couldn't get out of there fast enough. It was weird, Rusty said, but not completely inconceivable. Dolores was delusional. Nunez had been overly susceptible to the power of suggestion, and had imagined seeing a corpse because Dolores said there was a corpse, induced psychotic disorder. I don't know, she told him. If you're really seeing things, maybe you should take some time off. Go see the department shrink, Nunez had passed on the shrink. No use having someone else tell him he was crazy. But as it turned out, the time off was involuntary. He woke up the next morning with his right wrist ballooning. Dislocation fracture. "I must have fallen on it," he lied. No attention was paid to the 5 purple bruises around his wrist, so much like the prints of 5 strong, clutching fingers. Nunez told his final tragic tale of the Primrose Apartments as though it had been a dream. Testimony knotted together with conjecture and hearsay. He was on medical leave for 2 months while his arm healed. When he returned to the station, he was greeted with whispers and pitying stares. Rusty, bless her heart, had stood up for him, telling their superiors the incident with Michael and Dolores was a non-issue, a side effect of overwork. But he guessed the paramedic team had told everyone he was losing it. Luckily for him, he wasn't the only guy on the force rubbed the wrong way by the Primrose Apartments. In fact, even the tenants of the Primrose Apartments seemed put off by the place. According to Officer Ottenon, a desk cop that knew everything about everyone, families were jumping ship like rats before a storm. "They can't keep it filled," he'd said to Nunez over the water cooler. "They're at about half capacity now, and that's with subsidies from the country. No one can stay there for long, save the druggies who have already fried their brains. There's a rumor the building's haunted." Others sought him out as well, usually in secluded spaces, always requiring multiple assurances that, as far as top brass was concerned, the conversation did not happen. They'd been to the Primrose Apartments. They'd seen stuff. "It's always the users and the drunks," Officer Anderson murmured excitedly. "Always the same thing. They call us flippin' shit because they see some dead family member in the kitchen, or the fucking elevator, or staring down at them from the ceiling. If it were one, I wouldn't be too worried. But it's one every week, always at that godforsaken dump." "I think I'm going crazy," Officer Liu told him one late night, after everyone else had left. "Some old lady called us down there because she was convinced her neighbor was stealing from her. Total bullshit. We found her missing antique vase in the closet, right where she'd hid it from the home care nurse, who she also thought was stealing. You know the type. Anyway, I finished up with her, and my partner said she was going to the car, but when I stepped out into the hallway, she was waiting there. We took the elevator down. On the first floor I stepped out. She didn't follow me. I looked back, and she wasn't in the elevator at all. She'd just disappeared." This chill came over me, and I ran like a rabbit. I ran back to the car, and guess who I found sitting shotgun, talking on the phone to dispatch? My partner. I asked her how she got there so fast. She looked at me weird. She said she'd never gone back to the building. Dispatch had requested a landline. She'd been in the car, on the phone, the whole time. "If you don't mind me asking," Nunez said, "what did the two of you talk about on the elevator?" "Well, that's the thing," Officer Liu replied. "On the elevator, she'd asked me what I thought the point of life was. We're never really fulfilled, and then we die, and it's like we never existed. It was one of the most depressing conversations I've ever had. I swear, messed me up for weeks. And I noticed this weird smell. Like a wet basement mixed with potpourri?" "Yeah," Officer Liu said. "I'd say weed and mold, but that works too." Then Nunez learned about little Thaddeus Wheeler.